Really great to share some cyberspace and some brain space with you all today. I hope that it was really useful. I hope that it was, to some degree, I hope that it helped make virtual engagement a little bit easier for you, or at least gave you some really low-hanging fruit ideas that won't take a lot of your time, but will up the impact and engagement from folks. So I'm sending this video with the intention of sharing the too long didn't read, just kind of quick snapshot summary, knowing that our brains tend to hold things for some amount of time and then they leave. So just gonna kind of overview those 5 elements that we touched on really briefly. And then at the end, kind of touch on one of Rachel's questions at the end, which is how do you deliver really content-dense material in an engaging but short amount of time? It's a really hard question. I will offer some thoughts. And here we go. If you are one to listen to audiobooks on 2 times speed, feel free to edit the settings on YouTube and zip ahead here. So really quickly, just taking a look first at this unofficial start concept, the idea that you want to start with immediate and purposeful, ideally on-topic engagement 3 to 5 minutes before the official start time to honor the people who show up early, and run it into a few minutes after the official start to make space for the Wi-Fi connections and the tech issues and the commute from the kitchen to the living room through 3 sets of kids and a dog, whatever that is, right? And if you're only in chat, you can engage with that unofficial start. If you're asking somebody to answer a question in the chat, you can respond to that as if they're a human being, because the person who chatted that is a human being behind a keyboard, and yet somehow chat feels much less impersonal or much less personal, which it is, than having video on or even audio synchronously on. And yet, as presenters, if we're able to really connect with people as if there's a person on the other side of that camera, it translates through the screen. It's really powerful. The next piece is you want to offer context and framing, right? So if I say the word red, think of an object that's red, or first thing that comes to your mind. You think of a number of things. But if right now, and you can actually do this in your space, if right now I say, think of an object that's red and within 10 feet of your location right now, you're going to come up with a very different list of red things. And that is context. Context takes up lots of space in our brains. And so right at the very beginning of your session, rather than trying to cover it all, actually bringing the context in really tightly and just drawing the parameters and saying, and the easiest way to do that is to get really clear about what your intention, your overarching intention for the session is, and get clear about that and share it with the group. Because ironically, very often we have intentions that impact and affect other people, but very rarely do we actually take the time to share them with the people they affect. The next bit, which we spent a good chunk of time on, is this idea of connection before content. And in order to truly be connection before content, it's got to connect to the purpose of why you're there. It's got to allow people to connect to each other. So it can't just be to you, right? So even if you're, in the beginning of the session saying, hey, I'm Chad, my wife and I just moved to Pittsburgh, and I have this cute little son, Otto, and, creating that connection. That's great. And that creates connection with you at scale with the group. But what real connection before content is it connects people to each other. And ideally, it at least creates space for authenticity and vulnerability, space and choice for authenticity and vulnerability. It cannot and should not force it, but it at least gives people the option to be vulnerable. And so in our case, saying, go grab an object that represents a part of who you are, right, offered a pathway to being authentic and vulnerable, but also you get to choose the object, right? You're not saying, hey, go grab something you're really ashamed of and bring it back to the group to share with everyone, right? Then content, this is where, the intention of our session wasn't to dive really deeply into some of the dense and deeper content that you have to share, but I would love to spend time doing that, because there are lots of ways to make, and answering Rachel's question a little bit, there are lots of ways to answer or just kind of hit on make content come alive. And so one that I shared very briefly, right, is using props. And so having a couple core props. Bill shared Elmo, enough, let's move on. ELMO, which is beautiful, right? Like things like that give the group some voice and choice. If you've got a bunch of dense material to share and you don't have any avenue for the group to have voice and choice in that learning, it's going to be hard for them to digest and remember and stay engaged throughout. And then closing, which for those of you who stuck around until the very end, I keep one of the tools I created is called the We Engage cards, or deck of quotes with a bunch of pictures on the other side. And so there's all sorts of cool ways that you can use those to create meaningful engagement. But the one that I always leave on my desk is mistakes are the portals of discovery, because guaranteed every time, 100% of the time, I make some blunder, failure in a session, and I just need to remember that mistake is a portal to discovery. So my little misstep today, of many, my major misstep today was I talked all about Connie, this professional storyteller, and how important it is to close with intention and to know your last sentence or your last exercise, and then I didn't do a proper closing. So I'll share it with you now, but it's not going to have nearly the power as if we would actually do it live. But there's a million closings that we could share and unpack and that we could cater to your content material. But one of the ones that just generally is one of my favorites is an exercise called Group Anthem. You can do this in the chat. It is much better if you hear people's voices, but it works just perfectly in the chat. And basically you create a group, you're having a group create or write an anthem by making a closing statement in response to one of three prompts. Either I am, I believe, or I will. I am, I believe, or I will. And you have the group just popcorn that out. So I am going to take connection before content and experiment with it in my session next week. I believe that Unofficial Starts might have the power to create a little bit more intrigue and engagement and set my session apart from any other remote digital webinar sort of session that people have attended in the recent past. And so you have 15 people toss that out, and hearing 15 different voices in that way is really phenomenal. It's a powerful way to close with other people's words, not your own. Whew, I have no idea how long this was. I hope it was digestible. I hope it was useful. And I hope to share some cyberspace with you all again sometime soon. Cheers. Have an awesome day.